My mama was the cold north wind. My daddy was the son of a railroad man from west of hell, where the trains don't even run. Never heard the whistle of a southbound freight or the screaming of his driving wheel. No, I never did no wandering. Never did no wandering. Never did no wandering after all.
Yeah! Welcome to Frame Rate.
Yeah!
The show where we rate auto harp performances
Of
Abe,
Wandering.
How would you rate that?
I'm going to cross podcasts and say I rate that real good.
It's a real good dinosaur.
It's a
That's
real good
another show we
dinosaur,
do.
yeah.
Okay, great.
We rate real good dinosaurs. I will rate it Automatic for the People. Good album. It was as good as that.
Cool,
yeah,
cool.
and it's auto harp.
Wow,
why
that
is it
was-
called an auto harp, Caroline?
It's like a harp, but instead of strumming or having to individually press chords, there's buttons that manipulate the chords automatically.
Oh, so it is automatic. Okay, I thought I was dumb and that it meant auto, like you do it yourself, like autobiography. But I'm like, of course you do it yourself. That's all instruments.
They made it automatic for the people.
And then when you said I have an auto harp, I can bring it. I was thinking of a mouth harp the whole time.
Oh.
I thought we were gonna hear like boing, boing,
Boy,
boing,
and you're
boing,
like,
boing.
all right, all right.
Yeah.
Although I do have one.
Oh well, yeah, I own
It's a
one.
wonderful,
Yeah.
wonderful instrument.
Wonderful. It
But it's-
hurts like a motherfucker if you fuck it up and it clacks against your teeth.
The worst.
Yeah.
But it's what Mickey plays in the film that we're talking about.
The auto harp.
The
Yeah,
auto
yeah,
harp.
not
Yeah.
the mouth harp. So the film we were talking about. Well, first of all, frame rate. Show where we rate. I said that.
Yeah.
You,
Abe,
me, Michael. You.
Caroline.
Caroline is back with us. Caroline Anderson, welcome back to the show.
you remember her
you.
from the Body episode
Mhm.
of Buffy the Vampire Slayer.
Yes. And that episode is gone now. It's just
It's-
a husk.
yeah.
Don't reach out to touch it.
Don't touch it.
It's gone. Move on with your life.
Uh-huh.
And talk about A Mighty Wind.
Ah!
One of the Christopher Guest family of mockumentaries, which include so many classics.
Waiting
This
for
is Spinal
Government, Best
Tap,
in Show.
Best in Show, for your consideration, the only one I haven't seen still.
So like 5 films? 5?
No, there's more. There's
6?
more.
I
Okay,
would
let's do it.
say-
Caroline, you're a big guest head.
Yeah, I mean, I would say in terms of the mockumentaries, it's those 5, and then
Okay.
the series he did for HBO, the
Oh, yeah, the Family Tree
Family
series.
Tree, and then
Yeah.
also Mascots for Netflix.
I forgot that was Chris Guest.
Yes.
So, yeah, if you're in the comedy world, Christopher Guest is pretty much universally like hat tip, like respect to that dude.
Yeah.
Because he has a standard, like, effete British accent, and his range is unstoppable.
He's also transformative.
That's what
Yeah.
I mean. It's like, you
he-
can never tell it's
he's
him.
Nigel in This Is Spinal Tap, and also in The Princess Bride as the 6-fingered man.
Oh yeah, most people probably know, like, unless you like mockumentaries.
Yeah.
You probably know him as the 6-fingered man.
Yeah.
Fun fact about that scene in Princess Bride where he hits him on the head with the hilt of the sword.
Yeah.
He actually knocked Carrie Ellis out. He
Hey.
hit him way too hard.
Mm-hmm.
But anyway, we're talking about A Mighty Wind. Caroline, describe in a nutshell the plot, because it can be done in like 4 sentences.
Yes.
And why you picked the movie.
It is a mockumentary of a famous folk producer dying and his acts reuniting to put on a concert in his memory and following those acts.
Yep.
I picked it. I'm a huge Christopher Guest fan. It was growing up, Waiting for Guffman's the first movie I ever remember watching at all.
Oh, wow.
My parents don't have a ton of shared comedic taste, but Christopher Guest movies are. So it was like we had Spinal Tap figurines. We that was big in our family, and I love folk music enough to own and play an auto harp. It is my primary listening enjoyment. So specifically, I'd say probably Waiting for Guffman is my favorite, but I think Mighty Wind is my second favorite, just in terms of like, well, this is pleasant to watch for an hour and a half. Also, bonus, it's very funny.
Yeah,
Fucking
it is
hilarious.
infinitely pleasant to watch. It has that. If you've never seen it, I recommend you focus on it. But once you've seen it 4 or 5 times, it's one of those movies, like, I feel this way about The Labyrinth as well. I never object to it just being on.
Oh, yeah.
It's like really fine.
Yeah.
It's like pleasant. All the Christopher Guests are like that because they're so like prosaic. The humor is not as prosaic as like a Lake Wobegon, but it's not always sunny. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's way more towards the like dry comedy.
And the stakes are very medium. Like this is maybe
Medium
one of the
stakes,
more
yep.
high stakes ones of his movies, and it's just that Mitch goes away for a little bit and they're not sure if he's going to come
The
back.
show
Like,
might not go on.
Right.
Yes.
Yeah.
But usually they're even lower, like Waiting for Guffman. It's like some theatrical production in the middle of nowhere that no one was going to see might not go on.
Yeah.
There's no stakes.
or
Like, who
that it'll
gives a
go on,
shit?
but one guy might not come into
And
the
review
audience.
it for
Exactly.
the paper. Yeah, who
And best
cares?
in show is even less. It's just like, here's
Well, who's going to win?
who's gonna win.
But-
Some people really care about the Westminster Dog Show, or like it's on ESPN2 and shit. I don't know.
Yeah, well, I mean, they're not in our audience.
Yeah,
either, so-
but I wanted, as soon as I found out that you loved it, a lot of people love it in spite of, they're like, I don't care about folk music, but that movie's funny.
Yeah.
But you actually love folk.
I love
folk is also my favorite genre.
Yeah.
Can we just get obtused and like exclude Abe for a minute?
Hey,
You can talk, but I bet
don't-
you won't know anything.
Yeah, probably not.
What are yours like? I never ask favorite because it puts you on the
Yeah,
spot
yeah.
and you scramble and it adds pauses. So just name like 5 folk musicians you love.
I think like the center of my musical universe is like Pete Seeger, Judy Collins, Joni Mitchell, like a little Peter, Paul and Mary from Greenwich Village, a little of the Laurel Canyon people. I love Cass Elliot and like Mugwumps and all of her kind of pre-Mamas and the Papas folk music. Yeah, that's kind of my circle.
Okay.
Yeah.
Speaking of the center, one of my favorite jokes in the whole movie, the folksman complaining that they switched record companies and like they were a good company, but they didn't buy the machine that punches the holes in the records.
Right.
So like you'd get it and it would have no hole and it was up to you to punch the hole. But if you punched it, it was a good quality record. Like the music is good.
If you punched a hole in it first, you'd have a
You'd
good
have
time.
a good time.
Yeah.
That seems like, yeah, if
I
you
think
centered it right, you'd
Some
have a
of
good
the
time.
some of the sport of watching Christopher Guest movies, if you are a comedy fan who loves Christopher Guest movies, is not knowing what was improvised and what wasn't, and what you're seeing being developed for the first time.
Yes.
And that is a scene where I wonder if that's the first time that they've made that joke on camera, because there's just like a reaction to it of all three of them at the same time going like, like
Right.
good improvisers going like, yeah, we found it. We found the funny joke.
Right.
God,
Because like something like Curb Your Enthusiasm, which people might be more familiar with but their process in a nutshell is like improv, but improv for so long and so many times that it becomes, they're like, we found this through improv, but now we know this, we all love this bit, so every time we do the scene, include that bit.
Yeah.
So yeah, if you imbibe a lot of comedy, you get a gut reaction of that was improv, that
Yeah.
was landed at. And what I think is so interesting about their process is the depth they'll go. Like you'll have cognitive dissonance because you'll be like, well, that can't be improv because it cut away to a separate location showing them in witches' robes and shit. And it's like, no, it could have been improv.
And then they go shoot it.
And then they go shoot, like, so they would
Yeah.
fill in stuff after. So it's a very unusual process, even more so than I think Curb, where the improv element is just, how are you going to say these things?
Right.
But they go, well, it's a sitcom plot, and this is going to happen, and this is going to happen.
Right.
Christopher Guest movies really are collaborative. He's such a unique guy to me because, like, I don't know what he's like in person, but I imagine he must have a unique combination of a very strong vision, but also being incredibly flexible and collaborative. Because otherwise the movies couldn't, like, be done this way.
He reminds me a lot of just you describing the process of like Sacha Baron Cohen. Like if you rewatch like Borat, it does the same tricks. Like it's we got that. That's the footage we got. Well, now we got to shoot this
To
sequence.
support
Yeah.
that thing we got.
Yeah, and that's next 10 minutes of the movie, right?
Yeah.
It's just like, what? You walked into this thinking that there was a different 10 minutes of the movie that I was going to watch? No, we're just streaming along stream of consciousness documentary style.
Yeah, it seems to me like all they knew would happen is, like you said, that Mitch will wander away and then come back.
Yeah.
Probably they knew the folksmen would get mad at the Main Street
yeah.
Singers, and that's about it.
Yeah.
And they're like, now let's just get Who's Funny, get Ed Begley in here. What's Bob Balaban
I
up
mean,
to?
Bob Balaban. Watching Bob Balaban
Talk about dangerously low-hanging vine.
Yeah. Don't trip.
and
So, please.
the choice to just read all the cards really, really close. Anything he reads.
Which he sets up beautifully in an early scene where he just needs someone's name, and he pulls like a large sheet of paper all the way up to his
Right,
eyes.
right.
Yeah. Yeah, go ahead.
Well, just there's so many amazing people in this. Michael McKean, like Catherine O'Hara, Paul Dooley, but like the ones that really get me are, of course, Jane Lynch.
Yeah.
She's just
perfect.
So good as Mrs. Boner. And I gotta. Fred Willard might be his best guest performance.
Right.
Yeah.
Guest is also super loyal to a team. So if you watch all the movies, you start to get the same cast over and over.
Yeah.
And I would say 5-movie wide, Fred Willard, I'm always like, yeah, he's doing the Fred Willard thing. He's like middle to top middle of the pack, but there's like regulars I like a lot more. But in this one, Fred Willard kills in Mighty Wind. But I don't know if it's improv, but the structural delivery of going, and the Main Street Singers, he goes, oh, you have a song about the ocean. We'll drench everyone, even the ladies. And you know where the joke is going, but it's the craft of delivering the punchline this way. He goes, and we'll even drench the ladies. And then he just looks around, and then he just leans over and speaks silently into the nearest
and what's being said.
You know, it's like, that will make their boobs visible. It's like, I fucking know, dude.
You know, my favorite Fred Willard scene in the movie is obviously all the like 2-camera, like at a chair docu-style stuff is so awesome and super funny. But the scene where he's like accepting the plaque, just seeing him play off of a room of like 10 people not entertained by him is just, and like Jane Lynch in the back doing so much great work of just like, she never lets on that she is not the star of that scene.
Yeah.
But just like his response to his jokes falling on the floor as an actor, like, is so impressive.
Yeah.
His dedication to letting a joke land on the floor and not react to people not enjoying
or even
him.
pause.
Yeah,
like
exactly.
continues his monologue.
Yeah.
And yeah, I love Jane Lynch. You can see, because they're actors and because they've been empowered with the knowledge that they are part of the writing because they're improving, so many of the cast do fully fledged bits in the background that you wouldn't get in a scripted thing, because it would be the opposite. You'd be like, Leonardo DiCaprio's doing his fucking thing over here. Everyone shut up, sit still. But I love in that scene, it's clear that Jane Lynch thinks his jokes are funny and several times tries to explain them to other people.
Yeah. Right.
Like silently, you just see her leaning over and being like, you don't get it? Come on.
Yeah.
We were talking about before we started taping the magic of Jennifer Coolidge.
Yes.
Who is like, has such a unique vibe that I feel like Christopher Guest like discovered her in a diamond mine and was like brought her back to be in comedy.
One of my favorite just styles of jokes that is so anti in such a specific Guest way is when she just goes, I could just tell it's going to be a really, 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 really big thing. And then that's it.
Like an amazing
I commend that delivery you just
Thank
did.
you.
It's like, because it's vapid in a way that it's like, it's not just vapid if you just write it down. The performance itself alludes
She's
to
like
she
building
doesn't
up
know.
Oh
my favorite joke of hers is, if they didn't have the model train, they wouldn't have gotten the idea for the big
ones.
train.
My God.
Mine is when they all hum to commemorate his father's death, and she thinks humming is just opening your mouth and going,
Everyone else is going,
Oh my God. She also, I mean, there's a whole conversation to be had about the wardrobe in this movie, which is so excellent. Like, some of the most incredible wardrobe ever. But, God, what's the actor who she's paired with? I forget his name.
Larry Miller.
Yes.
He's also a
He is
hero
so
of
fun.
mine.
Yes,
God.
he's
He
incredible.
doesn't get a ton of play in this particularly.
But he has the ugliest suit I've ever seen. Like, it's like this double-breasted, like a size and a half too big for him.
Yes.
Kind of shiny material. Just like them paired together in the scene where there's so many like kind of these like polyester 60s like looks of just this version of like the mid 2000s PR.
I think Fred Willard, when he is accepting the plaque from the mayor, his pinstripe cream suit, I was like, I want that
Matching
suit.
his
I like
hair
that
dye.
suit.
Yeah.
That's
It's
on
the
brand.
exact color
That's
of
on
his
brand.
bleached frosted tips.
Yeah.
Just imagine that in every role you've ever seen in they give Fred Willard a suit and make him like a sportscaster who says dumb things.
Yeah.
In this one, he has frosted tips, and like he's the old guy who's trying to be young still.
Yeah.
It's just like Willard doesn't get to do that much.
Yeah.
Yeah.
To paraphrase an old joke, knock knock, introducing the Main Street Country Singers.
Yeah.
Oh, I also want to talk about. So, they centered it on, which I think is brilliant construction, because with improv,
Right.
you're basically just dictating like the loose parameters of a program and then letting the program run itself.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it was really smart, and I'm sure they were decided ahead of time, that they limited it to 3 groups.
Yeah.
And the groups, I was a little confused because I know folk well enough that I was like trying to plug stuff into specific stuff. And I want your opinion, Caroline, but I'm now of the opinion that the groups, like, it's not necessarily directly one-to-one. The folksmen are clearly the Kingston Trio.
Sure.
But in the other 2 cases, I think they represent what they saw as like a clear theme in folk music,
Yeah.
like this type of band.
Well, and I read an interview with
Yeah.
Michael McKean where he was talking about what specifically interested those 3 guys were like folk music written by men in suits in offices in Manhattan, like that sellout folk music, which is definitely New Christy Minstrels, New Seekers. Also, I think there's an Up With People element with the kind of spiritual undertones and sometimes very much overtones of New Main Street Singers, of like that Parker Posey was on the street, that Jane Lynch, like there's an insinuation that everyone is kind of being picked up from the street.
I've seen this about 10 times. Yeah, so that's the New Main Street. That's the Main Street Singers, which this is
The New
also a
Main Street
recurring
Singers.
thing, is they got basically only 1 original member's still in it.
Yes.
And there's 9 of them, but they're still the New Main Street
Which is the
Singers.
case with the New Christy Minstrels and the New Seekers. It's like
They
one of the
swap
people from the
out.
folk group is like, oh, it's been 6 years since anyone cared, but maybe we can still make some money, so I'll
Yeah.
just make a new band.
It's one of the very first songs you hear, and I think it's indicative of like this dry Christopher Guest, like David Sedaris brand of comedy, is a Main Street Singer song you hear that goes, "It's scary, but it's true. So do what the good book, do what the good book, do what the good book tells you to."
Yeah.
Yeah, I love
Yeah.
that.
It's so good. There's a conversation that's like very much reminiscent of This Is Spinal Tap between the trio, where it's like the most Christopher Guest joke I can think of. It's the one where they're talking about wearing their retro Dickies, whether or not they're gonna do that for the like
Yes.
the show.
Well, it
and
was
they have
retro
the
then, or it
Yeah.
was now then.
Is it now tro? Yeah, exactly. And the reason why I was trying to dissect it, the reason it's so funny to me is because they love to play with the idea of having the audience try to understand something that someone is understanding themselves. Like they're just getting the nuance of doing something before it was in and fashionable, and isn't retro, but time passes and now it becomes retro, and then finding a new word, nowtro, as like to describe something that's just in now.
Yeah.
Right.
You know, like,
And they're like adding the past and the future, and it's like the word you're looking for is just now.
Yeah. So it's taking a simple premise and like, how do words work?
Yeah.
And then usually it ends with like some kind of not eureka moment, but like realization, and like someone tries to pass as wisdom, and that's kind of the button of the joke, is that they decide that's the thing that is now the best. Like I'm the one who made that up.
Yeah,
you know?
it ends, and that's another trademark of improv. Is obviously like last time Caroline was on, we covered Joss Whedon, who writes very calculated, writerly writings. Whereas like with improv-driven stuff, you will get scenes where like Harry Shearer there's nothing punchy at the end of the sequence. He's like, so I take care of my skin now, and I like taking care of my skin, and it makes me feel confident on stage. And the scene ends.
Yeah.
And you're like, that's just what he improv'd in that moment,
Honestly,
man.
a moment that made me so happy and just like, I think I laughed at it, even though it's not a joke at all, is just the moment where the folksmen are introducing themselves, and Michael McKean is like, you know, I consider myself a guitar player at the time, and he wasn't half bad. Like, just the superhumanness of that conversation is like so, I don't think could be scripted.
Well, the dialogue's so realistic.
dialogue's so real.
Because to an impossible degree.
To an
'Cause
impossible
they're
degree.
just talking.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's like if you scripted this podcast episode, it can't be done unless you're scripting like, Mike
Right.
interrupts a lot. Like,
Yeah.
these things are hard to script.
Yeah. And there's something beautiful about the idea of like even the most average, the stupidest of us are ones that, like, even when we attach ourselves to false wisdom, that doesn't take away their humanity. There's something really, really endearing.
Every Christopher Guest character is so human. That's very true.
Yeah.
While also being super archetypal. Like,
Yes.
so my frame of reference as a human is that my dad was super involved in barbershop. He was like the former vice president of SPEBSQA, Society for the Preservation and Encouragement of Barbershop Quartet Singing in America. So I was around people who were this, but for barbershop. And then my uncle is the president of the Western Swing Association, which is a genre of music that is totally doesn't exist anymore, but it's basically big band on Western instruments, so like steel guitars and stuff like that. So I spent so much of my childhood around people who took their craft as seriously as these people take their craft. And it is like, so like, oh yeah, that's my Uncle John. Oh, that's the guy, like the upright bass player is such an archetype. And the like kind of handsome younger guy than the other two people in the band are such archetypes. And like the kind of tenor is such an archetype. But yes, also like, even if you don't have my frame of reference, you're like, these are just humans.
Well, my uncle Andrew
So
Calhoun, who I recommend people look up because this stuff is great. It's very lyrically challenging and dark and dense. This movie's like got me so hard because my uncle is Mitch.
Yeah.
He ran Waterbug Records, which shuttered last year, but for like 15 years they were the largest surviving folk only label in America. And Aeneas Mitchell started on his label, and he, like when he would come to visit, and he even kind of looks like Eugene Levy. You would come out in the middle of the night to get water and find him in his underwear, sitting on the corner of the couch, strumming like discordant chords and practicing lyrics like, I'm as lonesome as water, as lonesome as God. Like literally that scene in the hotel with Mitch where he's like, and I'm going home. I'm going home. And like just doing this. That is such a subgenre of folk that is so archetypal and true.
Yeah.
Is like the folk artist who's like, all these motherfuckers are singing about trains.
Yeah, all these
I'm
sellout-
going to sing about a guy dead in the gutter.
Yeah.
Like that's also a very clear subgenre of folk that I love.
The orb of the sunset or whatever it is.
So just to get it out of the way, Mitch and Mickey, I go back and forth whether they're Sonny and Cher or there's
Ian
a
and
lot
Sylvia are a huge one.
Yes.
Yeah.
But I guess they're just the archetype of the couple that is in love that are folk singers.
It's also Mary Travers and Bob Dylan.
Yeah, and even like Peter, Paul, and Mary, even though that's three people, like had the like we all love each other and that's what we write about vibe.
Right.
And then the third, and then the folks from the Kingston Trio. And I got to tell young people listening to this show who don't know the Kingston Trio, they are just as silly and theatrical as the Folksmen. And I legit like grew up on the Kingston Trio and think they're great. I recommend listening to Kingston Trio
If
music.
you like
rule.
if you like Loco Man, you might like Cuckoo You. Like there are like straight up like one-to-ones.
The two dated jokes that bother me now are the Harry Shearer transitions into a woman, and it's the joke is just look, he's a woman.
He's got a deep voice.
I'm bored of that joke at this point, but in society.
Yes.
And then also, I didn't realize till watching it with the captions, Loco Man is fucking not okay to write, dude.
Yeah.
And of course, they're parodying how appropriative the Kingston Trio were, but it's like crazy loco man, lazy sleeping in the sand. You're like, don't do that, dude.
Yeah.
I do want to talk about Eugene Levy, just stuttering back because there's so many hidden good jokes. Like he's so subdued that Mitch and Mickey are so subdued in this film because everyone else is like very larger than life, and we follow their little tiny narrative, like which is kind of more heart than the rest of them because the other ones are like fairly archetypal.
It ends up feeling like
or
the
have
main
no
plot.
problems.
Yeah.
It feels like the main plot because there's that the divorce and all that. You were talking about him strumming, Andrew strumming.
Trying to get home. I think his solo albums are called "Cry for
that's
Help."
what I was
with
saying.
Then
the
go ahead.
straight jacket.
No, it's just like the fact that he's in it after he gets divorced. They get divorced.
Yeah.
He's in a
Straight
straight
jacket.
jacket, and it's the album's called "Cry for Help."
Real quick, while we're on album covers, I went through my New Christy Minstrels and Kingston Trio records, and there is the New Christy Minstrels album "Ramblin'" has a cover that is exactly what all of the New Main Street singers. It's them all holding their instruments, including the upright bass, and hanging off the back of like a train,
The caboose,
caboose of a train, all with their instruments, and then And then they also have this one where they're kind of these caricatures that look exactly like the ones John Michael Higgins.
Sure, like children's books.
Children's
you'd get from
book
that
drawings.
era.
Oh, yeah.
Like
which,
a Benetton ad.
Yeah. But just that level of specificness with the way the kids are.
Totally.
Yeah.
The art direction is phenomenal in the sense that all the album covers are so specific to and show such a deep knowledge of this subject matter.
Yeah.
That if you're into folk, you can be like, that's
That's that
specific
cover.
album.
Yeah.
That's that album
Yeah.
from 1967.
Yeah.
Amazing
I love.
research.
Is it the Folksmans have the worst, like the least?
Just all the
It's
apostrophe
Singin',
titles.
Wishing, Picking. Those are their 3 big albums.
Yeah.
And then after the divorce, his second album is Calling It Quits, and he's just digging his own grave.
Yeah.
Yeah, I also love that segment has, because they use non-diegetic sound, like interviews will happen over footage of, which is a
Yeah.
common documentary
Documentary.
trope, right? But I love the moment because you were talking about him trying to write a song in the hotel room. The one hidden joke in that is that it's not in the hotel room, but he's over at Mickey's house with her new husband, and they're fucking and shaking the wall.
Yeah.
And he is he realizes that it's rhythmic, that he
starts
might,
playing
Yeah.
in rhythm.
and that had to be improv. Like
Yeah.
that had to be, because he realizes that he could maybe use it as like a drum, but then it becomes arrhythmic, and then
Yeah.
he
Gives
gets
up.
angry because he's like, I thought we had a thing going.
Yeah.
Like, and it's just the saddest moment I can
Yes.
think of is
Yeah.
that he gets out of beat with the fucking of his
His ex-wife.
ex-wife.
His performance, the voice is so, like, I was watching it with Jen, and she was pointing out how in Schitt's Creek he doesn't really shine. He's like the stable, like, I'm just acting like myself, Eugene Levy, like a friendly, approachable man. And you would never guess that he can give us this bizarre, like, shades of, fucking what's his name? He just won the Nobel Prize for literature. Most famous folk singer in the
I
world.
don't follow I'm not a prize head.
Bob Dylan.
Bob Dylan.
Oh,
yes.
I think he also has shades of Dylan.
Dylan,
He's got shades of
Especially
Dylan.
like Dylan after his brain is drug fried.
Right.
And I just think it's phenomenal how, like, if you're going to give Christopher Guest a chance or you haven't seen him before, at least watch 2. Because one of the things that's magical is it's not only like they're like, here's some characters I can do. It's as if the entire cast is actively challenged to be like, show as much range as humanly possible.
Yeah.
Like to go from This Is Spinal Tap to A Mighty Wind
Yeah.
to Best in Show. If you track, I mean, as I said, there's some people like Fred Willard's allowed to just be Fred Willard.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But if you track specifically what Chris Guest is from each movie to each movie, you're like, this dude could do Hamlet or Ace Ventura. He can do fucking anything.
Yeah. Catherine O'Hara, I think the most.
Is
I mean,
the
obviously
standout of
she's the
standouts.
most talented
And on
actress
Schitt's
there's
Creek.
ever been.
Yeah.
But,
Yeah.
yeah.
I'd also argue that this movie created the persona that made Jane Lynch, like the rest of her
what
career.
she is now usually cast
Because
as.
like it's almost as if in Party Down, if you've watched Party
Yes.
Down, they just took her in this movie and just
Yeah.
said, let's put
And
her
that kind
in
of
that.
cemented it
And
for
that
casting
cemented
agents.
kind of like,
Yeah.
and then it's like a 40-year-old virgin and stuff
Yeah.
like that.
I never realized, and this has to be like the 10th time I've seen it, the oblique references to the fact that she was specifically an anal porn star.
Yeah.
Apparently.
Things that the
before
other
this.
girls wouldn't do. Yeah.
I also love the turn of when she's like, and that's when the clouds parted, and I got it. Like the positive moment in her life
Right,
story is when she
right.
started doing porn, which is
Yeah.
just such a like funny joke that I hadn't heard.
Right.
And then who's the guy that's paired with her? He's
John Michael Higgins.
Sorry, yeah, because I know
Genius.
he's a core Chris Guest member. I don't know if this is like talking too much shit, but like he's the one where I don't think he keeps up with everyone else. I feel like he's a tier below the skill level of everyone
I don't know.
else.
When he's telling the other guy that he's got to be on the 6 and he has to stay in his skivvy, or he has to stay in his uniform until he hasn't proven himself. Like when he's that scene is, I think,
I think what got me
excellent.
is when he's talking about humans are just color manifested on the 49th vibration. That's the only time in the entire runtime of this 90-minute movie that I was like, I can tell that's an improv actor
Yeah.
improving. I don't know.
If there were one word to describe him, what would it be? Would it be professional?
Oh yeah, he's the lawyer from Arrested Development.
Yeah, he's got range. I think
he's great in Best in Show.
Yeah, he's fantastic in Best in Show.
He's incredible in Best in Show.
He's got range. I just don't know if this is the best fit for him, because I think that it's hard to, because of all the things that we've been saying about Jane Lynch, like he's just in her shadow, because she's so.
That might be.
It's such a perfect thing when she says jokes like, you know, and that's after we filmed the Christmas special, which was, I believe it was called Not So Tiny Tim. You know, it's just like one after another, just jokes about the fact her name is Mrs. Boner. Like, they're just, it's just
she's
a Rolodex
also taller
for
than
her.
him. Like, they're visually super, like, she's so imposing in frame compared to him.
Yeah, and there's a lot.
It's specifically, I left porn and then I was the new Mrs. Boner, and it's like, wait, they sound the same.
Also, she reads, when you watch the movie, she really reads as someone you believe is like really into new age shit.
Oh yeah,
you know, and he does not. Like, he
I didn't
feels
buy
like
it.
he's not.
Well, but
I do love.
Like
I love their pre-show prayer. I think it's very
well,
fun.
and I think it speaks to a relationship. There's like an undertone of that. Maybe he's not straight, and maybe he's like pretending to be straight for religious reasons. That's at least
that
something
might be it. That might be what was throwing
that
me.
there's kind of a sexuality interest watching them, and to me it speaks to a hetero-facing relationship with a much stronger woman than man, of like just adopting the woman's spiritual beliefs and like acting as a, oh yeah, of course, anyone walking down the street could tell you that. Like, it's the lies that he tells himself because his wife, who's the more powerful person, that's the way I interpret his acting.
I think
it's like Walter
right
Sobchak converting to Judaism sort of thing, where he's like, it just makes sense, and he's like, no, it doesn't, man. It's because your ex-wife was Jewish. Yeah, I could see that. Yep. Speaking of range, I read a fact that actually made me really sad, both because I missed it and because of what happened. They toured, because Spinal Tap was by far the biggest hit out of these films. Well, Best in Show did really well, but there's no like band associated with the film.
Sure.
Spinal Tap was a big enough hit that they toured several times, like the Blues Brothers used to. Nice. Did they open as
with
the Folksmen?
Yes.
Okay. I read on IMDb, and I don't know how true this is, that at a lot of shows the Folksmen would get booed. Because people are there like, I like that it's funny, but I actually like heavy metal music, and who the fuck are these folk people? And you like, you assholes.
Yeah.
It's the same guys you're here to see.
This is Spinal Tap.
Yeah, this is Spinal Tap. Well, what's interesting is that the Folksmen have existed so long before this movie. They did SNL in the 80s, and then they did a UCLA Folk Festival in the early 90s.
As an SNL sketch.
It began as an SNL sketch. So
Yeah.
they have been touring as Spinal Tap since the 80s, but only have people outside of people who watched that episode of SNL known about the Folksmen. So there is... Yeah, when Spinal Tap would tour in the early 2000s, people would be furious. And then I saw them in like 2008 or something, where people had a frame of reference for it and were like, yes,
so
I understand
just
what's
lag
happening.
time. They're like, oh, from that movie. All right.
Exactly.
Speaking of different media of performing or recording arts, that one of the things that I love about this movie is if you buy the DVD or the Blu-ray, they actually made the program that is the
memorial
movie,
show,
the memorial
in full
show
length.
with no like comedy or anything, just the footage they got.
Yeah.
Anytime they were like, all right, this would be live, they recorded the take
with the cast fully
and then
involved.
they cut it in.
Yeah.
And it's as if you were watch it on live TV.
Watching
which
it,
is so fun.
And they've done that performance several times also as
a
special event.
That's so great.
Watching it, I am so pulled out of stuff when the music is pre-recorded. Sometimes it's more obvious than others, but it was really hard in this one if I was like, God, this really sounds live. Like, a really more with New Main Street Singers. I think a lot of it was pre-recorded because that's a lot. It's 9
a lot
part
of people.
harmony.
As
and
they say
music.
in the movie, it's a nuktet.
It's a
it just
nuktet.
makes sense.
Yeah.
That's how many people you need in a band.
But there's like parts where I was looking at Catherine O'Hara's hands and being like, that is what I'm listening to.
Yeah.
Like, there's just, I'm absolutely certain this is recorded live. So either it was recorded live and that's impressive, or they did such an incredible job of audio mixing that me, who is instantly turned off when I'm watching something and can hear the room tone change.
It has a Weird Al level of novelty musicians who want to be taken seriously to it, or at least be like, no, you don't understand. We didn't just write funny lyrics and karaoke some bullshit. Like,
Right.
we perfectly recreated this thing we love, and it happens to have funny lyrics over it, but the music is exactly correct.
Yeah.
Like, they really try hard. And that's doubly amazing because I know these happen out of sequence, so it's like, well, I guess they started knowing that they're all into music. But it's incredible to me, like, if you had just seen Best in Show and For Your Consideration, it's like mind-blowing to think this exact same cast can also all play musical instruments
Right.
at a professional level while delivering another comedy film of this caliber at the
Right.
same time.
It's just
When Catherine O'Hara learned auto harp for the movie, and she's musically, I think, the weakest, which is why she's so
just
incredible.
strumming
And
filler chords.
and vocally, she doesn't have what a Jane Lynch or what one of the others did, but it's beautiful. I mean, I have no complaints. I have
That
no
song
notes. She
is
like
great.
trained
Yeah.
herself. And
Yes.
did the work. Like, there's no joke of that the work wasn't made. The joke isn't that the music's bad. The
Or
joke
that she
isn't
sings off key. No, yeah.
yeah. She is an actress who said, "No, I'm gonna do this right." Like,
Yeah.
so good.
And
that
then-
performance in general, like, because you forget about, they play you the song, like the recorded version of their hit
Yeah,
early on, and then you get Eugene Levy and her performance,
yeah,
and he's a completely different man now. You know, at one point he actually says, like, the audience is looking for a man who's dead.
yeah.
Doesn't exist.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and he's talking like that. And then when we get to the actual performance, his voice, I was just like, I was captivated. It's such the best song to end on.
Yeah.
Because it's so, I mean, obviously it's the story building up to it, but
You
that
mean the
number,
song "The Mighty Wind"?
no, not
No,
the Mighty
A Kiss
Wind.
at the End of the
Kiss at the
Rainbow.
End of the
Kiss at the End of
Rainbow.
the
The
Rainbow
climactic song.
is
Yeah.
the yeah,
Not the
that
final
is
song.
so fucking satisfying because his voice and her voice just fucking are awesome.
Yeah.
They just
Together,
rule.
yeah.
Yeah,
And
and
one-
it's a well-made song.
One of the best parts of the movie isn't a particularly funny scene, which is her saying that she gets really nervous and that she has to just look at him and think about him performing.
Right.
Like, it's such a just a beautifully acted scene, and you see it play out in the thing, and it's the choice to include that in a comedy movie, I think, is like speaks
Yeah.
to how much of the movie is made in
The
editing.
human.
I also
Yeah.
thought
The
it was
human
an
element.
interesting choice that their choice for the denouement is that they both say, "Oh, the other person wanted to get back together, but I didn't. I never
Yeah.
meant that."
All right.
Yeah.
And you know that they don't get together, like she doesn't leave Mr. Crab.
Yeah.
But you don't know the truth of who thought what.
Yeah.
It's just like, it really is like, yeah, there was this thing that existed once. It doesn't exist anymore. For one day, we re-inhabited that place,
Yeah.
but it's not. Which is just an interesting, and it goes with the vibe of these more grounded comedy movies. In any other comedy movie, it would have cut to a year later, and it would be like, and now they're married again and touring for
Or
whatever
here's a
reason.
hard joke about like, and then we got
Or
in this
he
fi-
did
yeah.
kill himself.
Exactly.
Yeah, or something like that.
There's
yeah.
something amazing about the lack of sensationalism that these type of movies kind of
They
evoke.
keep everything medium, like
They keep
Caroline
everything-
said. Yeah.
What's amazing though is there's like when you look at the production of this movie, there's little bits of that happening too because they're like much in the same way you're describing your aunts and uncles, both of you, like very good into it, very like high quality, very like real situation where they are good at their job. But like not necessarily world renowned where they can get into doors just by
Right.
uttering their name.
Yeah.
In the same way, this production, they had a moment where they had to do the scene where they wanted to get the train because he was really into
Crabville.
trains.
Crabville,
The
yeah.
Crabville.
Crabtown.
When they heard all about in like the nearby towns that they were filming that there's like this house and there's this guy who's like the train enthusiast of
Yeah.
the area, and just like everyone was talking about how he's got all these trains, it's amazing. He got there. I mean, he had a bunch of trains, but none of them worked.
Or they were packed
'Cause they're all
away,
so
and he's
old.
like, "This
Yeah.
would take me weeks to set up." I'm not
Yeah,
gonna do
exactly.
that."
So
Yeah.
they actually had to like take dental floss and like move the train
Amazing.
for that shot.
Amazing.
Like those
It's
three
funny
shots.
that you can book Town Hall in Manhattan,
Yeah.
but you couldn't get a working model
You couldn't
train
get a
for your
working model
shot.
train. And that's just funny to me. It I don't know. It just it's like reflecting the production, reflecting the point of the film.
Yeah.
It's just like sometimes people are like, it just doesn't work out.
Yes.
Yeah.
You know?
God. The Bob Balaban's bit. Building to what he finally
Blah, blah,
found.
blah,
I
blah,
know
blah.
what my bit is. It's that I don't understand how anything works, but I'm
Yeah.
concerned.
Yeah.
It slays me. Like,
Yes.
are the microphone tops going to
What
be
do I
on
write
there?
it down as? Do
What
I
do
call
you-
it the microphone
On
or the
top of
microphone tops?
They're just called microphones, and they're coming. Well, we really need those. You'll have them.
Is this an actual street lamp? Can you have it next to, can you have a three-dimensional thing
Can you
next
have a real three-dimensional object on stage that's standing in for itself next to a two-dimensional object portraying a three-dimensional? Yes, it's fine.
Now, those lights.
Those lights up there. Those
Yes,
are the
they're
lights.
Those are the
lights.
lights. And above that is a ceiling.
That's one of like only 3 comedy scenes in the movie. Like there's
you're right.
the Swede who speaks Yiddish
That has a
Like,
sketch
yeah,
premise.
exactly.
Yeah.
Ed Begley Jr. plays
Ed Begley
Lars
Jr.
Olafsson, a thoroughly Swedish guy. And I love words and I love Yiddish words,
Yeah.
but he says at least 6 words, and I'm like, I didn't even know that
Yeah.
one.
He's
He's like, it
doing
was like a
circles.
shock when we did it. Yeah.
And I'm
doing
schviltzing.
fucking circles.
It's like, even in the climax when they're like, Mitch is gone. What? He's just gone. We don't know. Oh, if we don't have Mitch, we'll have a spank-a-spoink. We'll have nothing. And he's like,
Was the Hoodlin Lodel Gomen? Is that his song? The How's It Hanging Grandma?
Hoodlin
Just
Lodel Gomen.
a sketch that is just one of 3 sketches in this otherwise non-comedy movie that's full of jokes and is very funny.
Right, yeah,
yes.
exactly.
And I would argue the songs have sketch premise brain behind
Yes,
them.
they
Yeah.
do.
Although,
But you're right that it's interesting that in a traditional scripted comedy, each sequence is sort of a sketch, and they just build a basic plot and you string them all together. But every scene is like, it's the same as you would do on a UCB stage. What's the game? Oh,
Yeah.
it's a twist on this. You escalate that.
Yeah.
This movie is more like, we'll just sit around and stew in this funny sort of vibe.
And
Yeah.
like, yeah, just kind of like find a character and the way in which they speak and pick that apart.
You're like,
Yeah.
he's an interesting character to
Oh,
watch
man.
and listen to.
You know, I just started. Michael McKean, I think, is the best
Is a
actor.
god.
He's a god, but his face when they have to vamp and when they're doing like the skeletons of Quinto talking about the Spanish Civil War, he has
Yeah.
this like just this face of being checked out that is like, oh, it's just unreal.
Yeah. And if you somehow haven't made the connection, Simpsons fans, Harry Shearer is a core member of this crew and is also, you know, Principal Skinner and Flanders and Mr. Burns and a lot of great Simpsons characters. But like, Simpsons enough is enough for me to like have a soft spot for him, but that he did that and he's a linchpin in the guest movies is
Yeah.
like, oh,
He's-
that guy's cool.
Yeah.
What a career to get
Yeah.
to do. That seems so fun to do those 2 things.
I mean,
Yeah.
what a voice, right?
What a
Yeah.
voice. Like at least 8 great voices. And although when you start to know which characters are Shearer on The Simpsons, you're like, I never realized, but Smithers sounds very much like Principal Skinner. It's not even
Yeah.
that different.
Yeah.
But my favorite, maybe the hardest I laugh at a single moment in the movie is always Harry Shearer's pivot on a dime when they're asked to vamp. First of all, Bob Balaban doesn't know
Hell yeah.
How to do stretch.
what the
Hell yeah.
universal hand sign for vamping is. So he
Yeah.
just does castanet hands.
Yeah.
Like you gotta talk.
How to talk.
And,
Yeah.
and they're like, you mean stretch? And he's like, stretch, stretch,
Yeah.
stretch. And he does, which the Kingston Trio would do. So the Kingston Trio have a famous song that was against a rate increase on the MTA. And it starts with just like diffuse chords and going like, once upon a time in the city of Boston, there was a tragedy, and that's what we're going to tell you about. And Harry Shearer does a pitch perfect impression of that with something, they picked the perfect thing, something no American audience gives a shit about.
Oh my God.
They're like, this song is a sad one about something I'm sure you learn, you know,
At
you
this time of year, we all think
we all
about.
think
Yeah.
about the Spanish Civil War. And he's like, in this year, the little towns of Madrid and Barcelona were racked by civil war. And he talks for a long time. We cut away and we cut back. Stagehand comes in and whispers in his ear. And he goes like, and that's when they decide, oh, good night, everybody.
Yeah. Just on a dime. Just completely.
And they were supposed to play a song
Yeah,
related
yeah.
to that. Yeah.
just very professional, doing what is
God.
asked of us,
Yeah,
but like
exactly.
doesn't need to be. I also love how the disdain that
They hate the new Main Street
They
Singers.
hate
Oh
them,
my God.
and they're just like when they're all listening to Mitch and Mickey's show, and they're like, "How are they going to deal with the kiss? $5 says," and then they like all walk up to the side of the set, and they look in, and it's just like, oh, they're the new Main Street Singers are like, oh, this is so wonderful,
Parker
and the
Posey's
clutching,
crying, yeah.
and then they're just like, shut the fuck up, basically, and I love how it's not even that they hate them. I mean, they do. They call them cookie cutter.
They're just music snobs.
But they're
folk
snobs. But like,
Yeah.
it's not even like they're actively hating them. They're just like, you don't matter to us.
Yeah.
Is what make that nuance, that difference is.
Yeah.
It's amazing that I can glean that from their performance. Is
Yeah.
that's what's happening.
I want to shout out 2 very small performances in the movie, both by women. Rachel Harris, incredible.
Yeah.
I mean, she's so good. But just that one scene where she's like, "Did you get it in writing? And did he say that he's going to do it?" And just so
I'm
good.
just protecting you.
Just so good.
Yeah.
And then the other, I had to look up her name, even though she's in all of the guest movies, is Deborah Thieker, and she played one of Bob Balaban's sister.
Oh yes.
She has the best reaction shots in
Every
the
reaction
crowd.
shot. I could watch a movie that's just
Yes.
her in the crowd reacting.
Both of
Feeling
them.
that
I mean,
music is beautiful.
yes.
Like she's so funny when
crying,
she's experiencing
Grief
beauty.
over her dad.
And
like,
it's- yeah.
there's
But then
so
also
much.
like middle-aged white woman grooving to the
Clapping,
music
yeah,
when
yeah.
it's good. Yeah.
And I also she's there with the brother, right?
Yes.
And the brother.
You get the vague impression didn't like the dad or whatever.
No, he says earlier, like, I don't know.
like it.
The one piece of information we know about him is that he doesn't like
Care
folk
about
music.
also
any
that he
of
liked
this,
poker.
Yeah, and then he liked
yeah.
poker. Yeah. And
Which Michael McKean probably
and
just
all he does is clap.
improv forced
yeah.
on him, and he's like, all right.
Yeah.
and it's also important because that's what this whole event is for.
Yeah.
Right? And we get in that. That's why we cover them so often in the crowd shots. Is
Yeah.
that this is who it's for. This is the memoriam of their dad.
These are the fans. Yeah.
There's fans, no, but these are the
oh,
children.
family.
Oh, you
And,
mean they made it
and
happen.
one of them is exactly what you like, the best response you could ever want from any audience member, and the other is like, I just want to leave.
Yeah.
I'm just killing time.
It's just like a great
Yeah.
combination of like, what does that tell you about the man? Nothing.
And Bob Balaban's
It's
just being
literally the
preoccupied
gamut.
with his nerves. Yeah. The
Yeah.
whole
Yeah.
time.
It's all options are on the table.
Yeah.
Could love it, hate it, doesn't matter.
I mentioned this to Michael earlier, but I grew up on this DVD and like consumed the deleted scenes and the commentaries.
Yeah.
There's jokes that I remember so vividly from the movie that watching it this week, I was like, oh, I guess that joke's not in the movie at all. But one of the things, if anyone doesn't know, Paul Dooley's character, if you notice, he doesn't strum his guitar once in the entire thing. He
Can't
doesn't play his guitar. And there's a joke that didn't make it in the cut, which is that before the very first performance, he got something on his shirt and held a guitar over it to cover it up, and so he's just been holding a guitar ever since. That's like an in-universe joke of it, which is so
That's
funny.
Great.
Also, isn't that a famous? That's Tom Dooley. That's a Kingston Trio song.
That's so funny.
Hang
though.
down your head, Tom Dooley. Linking back to our last Caroline episode from years ago at this point. Powerpuff Girls on the TV in the hotel
Jim
room.
Yeah, you
Reddick
promised.
watching it.
Which I'm sure they mean nothing by it. It's just so specifically tied to such a specific time in my life that I'm
Yeah.
like, oh, Powerpuff Girls is on in the middle of the day on TV. I know exactly what time this is of
Same
human
with the
history.
Samsung
Wow.
ad. Like the
Oh, yeah,
when he's
that
out, I was
ad.
like, yeah, I remember when that Samsung ad was. Yeah.
What
Do you
did
know-
that even mean? Or I'm asking, do you guys think there was a filmic meaning behind? Because he wanders to get a rose, and I get what that means. It means
Yeah.
he's enjoying the rekindling.
Yeah.
But why did they have that thing where he stares at Times Square and it zooms in like a Ferris Bueller painting on the Samsung ad?
That shot is definitely weird. My only thought was that maybe it has to do with cell phones as a passage of time, Times Square and Greenwich Village, something about like how different that is from his experience. Like he like took a bus to get there. He doesn't know where he is. So like a animated cell phone dancing on a Times Square.
And they have him later outside at a high-end electronics kiosk.
Yeah.
So yeah, it might just be about modernity and him
Yeah.
being like, everything's different.
Yeah, I didn't.
Well, folk obviously doesn't have much of a place in the zeitgeist anymore.
I didn't
Yeah.
glean any references, which if there was, I'm just out of the loop. But that I kind of gathered that the idea was that he needed to go ambling because that's kind of the thing that
He never
his
did
character
He
no
never did no
wandering.
wandering.
Yeah.
yeah. And it's like kind of the model of the folk hero, right?
Yeah.
This, I'm gonna go take a walk, and whatever the world shows me, I'm gonna interpret that as like my
Buddha
next
did,
event.
Siddhartha.
And that's kind of the duality of what this picture and most Christopher Guest mockumentaries do, is they try to take something and someone wants something significant to happen, and when nothing significant happens, it doesn't mean that it isn't significant to them. It just means that it can be funny how mundane it is to everyone else. And so it could have been him walking on, and like he goes off into a mountain, and there's an eagle lands on his shoulder, and he realizes, this is what I have to do with my life now. I'm a conservationist or something like that. To him, going and having some pizza and being on the shitty Times Square and seeing like the corporateness of it all was his realization that he had to get a rose for Mickey. Like that's what I gleaned from it, is just that this was him with the expectation that he was going to find something at Times Square because he couldn't be there any longer. And that's what it came out with, because that's what he wants to be, that folk hero so bad.
Yeah. Well, you know, screenwriting is ultimately about conflict and conflict resolution. And in Guest movies, like, relatively little conflict and almost never an interesting conflict resolution.
Yeah.
It's just like, oh, well, we don't want to wear the Dickies. There's not some joke of what they're wearing instead of the Dickies. They're just wearing tuxes. Or like any kind of argument they have is then resolved in a really human small of like, and then they just did the thing that they were supposed to do.
In Best in
it's not a
Show,
thing.
one of the dogs wins, and it seems almost randomly. It could have been any of the dogs.
could have
Who
been any of
cares?
the
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. I think that's the superpower.
We
of
talked
these
before
movies.
recording, but do you guys prefer Main Street Singers or Folksman's version of Wanderin'?
This is an interesting conversation.
Well, when I first saw the movie, the first thing after we saw the credits, my brother turned to me. He's like, I like the new Main Street Singer version better. I guess I like the Folksman version better, but only because there's like, I have damage of that like cheery from my dad's barbershop stuff. And like, I was raised on that cheery stuff. And I do really like New Christie Minstrels, but I just have a smaller appetite for it.
Abers?
Yeah, I don't give a fuck about
Do you like either
folk
of the songs?
history. I think Main Street Singers is good because it sounds the best.
Oh man, I hate
I don't
all
care.
the Main Street
Here's-
Singers
here's
I
songs.
don't care about the history of folk music.
I agree completely with Harry Shearer fuming in the back of the set.
That
where
makes
he's
sense.
Like, well, if people just want a fucking toothpaste commercial, then they can listen to the Main Street Singers. I'm like, snaps, man, right on.
Right
Take it.
on,
Yeah.
right on.
I'll briefly use
Unionize, fight the power.
I'll use my music degree for one thing in my life ever. And so do you know what a Picardy third is? Anybody? Anyone out in the audience?
No, I don't.
So a Picardy third is this very cheesy musical sequence, which is that when you have a minor song and then you choose to end it in major. It's kind of the equivalent of like ending a Christmas song with jingle bells. Like when
Right.
you end a song, it's like ding, ding, ding. Ding, ding, ding. So anyway, it's very kind of cheesy and looked at in the world of musicology as like kind of a lazy choice, which is you've had the song in minor the whole time and then the very last thing is major, like, oh, and we're not sad anymore. And the Folksman version of Wanderin' stays in minor the whole time. New Main Street Singers has a Picardy third. The very last final chord is a major chord, and that's where you get that like and then in the end it was all okay.
But
like,
also the fact that
I
they
don't get-
feel the need to find 9 vocal parts
Oh,
or like
sure.
7 vocal
Yeah,
parts
yeah.
makes it sound not grounded, because it's like a cheerful church choir is singing
Sure.
their rendition of
Yeah.
some like I Will Survive, but it's like, but you're not evincing the heartbreak of I
Yeah.
Will Survive. You're just going like, I will survive. It's a
Yeah.
great song. Let's all listen to the song.
Yeah.
And I'm just into the Kingston Trio, because
Yeah.
literally
That's
Christopher
true.
Guest is doing a spot on impersonate. Like that's what the Kingston Trio guy sounds like.
Yeah.
Well,
I think, that from characterization standpoint, they're more interesting to watch because what you're both kind of talking about how the Main Street Singers they're so available, they're exactly what pop music does to everything, every genre, that it's like, what do you have to say about that hasn't been said about like toothpaste and bubble gum and all that,
Right.
kind of thing. whether or not it's a major chord or a minor chord at the end, or whether or not it's it's more realistic to the trope that they're trying to lampoon or whatnot.
Mm-hmm.
I just think it's that song with that arrangement sounds better. It's musical taste, right?
What was your favorite song?
I think A Mighty Wind.
A Mighty Wind.
I think so.
Which I got the impression this time is probably a parody of This Land Is Your Land, right?
Right.
Yeah?
Yeah.
And so I was
I just think
wondering
it's
if the
funniest.
title's a fart joke. And I didn't think there was any conclusive evidence because the real key joke of the Mighty Wind song is
Blowing you and
it's
me.
blowing peace and freedom.
It's
It blows
blowing me.
equality. It blows that peace and freedom. It's blowing you and me.
Yeah.
Which
Yeah.
is a blowjob joke, not a fart joke. But Caroline, I heard you saying
Well,
there's additional lyrics that do even more point to it being a fart thing,
so
right?
there's a Spinal Tap song called "Break Like the Wind."
Break Like the Wind,
Break
but
Like
that's
the
a
Wind is
different
Spinal Tap song.
So they
Yeah.
probably didn't want to repeat themselves. They're like, let's
Right.
make this
Yeah,
blow
yeah.
joke a blowjob joke.
Yeah.
Because once again, it's like you can do. There's many ways to do a fart joke or a blowjob joke.
Yeah.
How you do it is really
They just both involve the word
the
blow.
true.
And
true testament
concept
of
of wind.
time.
There's
Yeah.
a big wind blowing everywhere. Well, they're also good at the humor is this dry deadpan of like
To the
that's so close
crass
to
low,
real.
yeah.
It sounds like if you're not paying attention, you're like that lyric's fine.
Yeah.
But then if you think about it, you like a wind blowing everywhere is a terrible metaphor for
Sure.
the strength of like people getting together and fixing things.
Right.
Like what a weak ass metaphor. There's this wind that's blowing around everywhere. Like that's not a
Yeah.
good folk image.
No, it's
Yeah.
once again harkens to the same, like my favorite joke of all time, which is not a joke. It's in John Adams, which is
Oh, nice.
famous statesman Benjamin Franklin sitting on his own balls.
Yeah,
is
going,
one of the
"Oh,
funniest-
my
my
stones."
It's just very funny because you think of Benjamin Franklin, you think of inventor. You
Yeah.
think of, a mighty wind and what they're trying to say as like, oh yes, it's this thing. Like I see, this land is my land.
Yeah.
This land is your land. Oh no, it's just a fart joke. It's about getting blown.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's about getting ahead from freedom
Yeah.
or whatever.
I mean,
Or whatever.
one of my favorite songs is "Potatoes in the Paddy Wagon,"
Oh,
which,
that's a great
as
So
someone who grew up
cloying.
listening to the album, there's fully like 7 verses that
Yeah.
aren't in the movie. They just go
Oh,
from the
that's
very
hilarious.
first to the end. But a song called "Potato in the Paddy Wagon"
Yeah.
that is about like a daughter going up and getting married, like just the layers of
It's a story
Joke-
song
story
about
song.
an ugly baby
an ugly baby.
who gets taken to jail, and then the twist is the sheriff was just gonna marry me,
Yes.
Papa. Well, he wasn't
Yes.
taking me to jail. But like the lyrics
I love
are.
it.
That's my problem with the Main Street Singers. As cutesy as they could
Oh my
possibly.
God.
Mama
Yes.
just loved her. What was it?
Mama just loved her little sweet potato baby with a face like a
parboiled
parboiled yam.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's the musical equivalent of hamming it up. It's like
Yeah.
Main Street Singers are like Jim Carreying all their songs.
I mean,
I get it.
truly, and Potato said, "Daddy shut the goddamn door. Sheriff wants to marry me."
Sheriff wants to marry
Sheriff
me.
will marry me. Yeah, it's
I like the brutal reality of a Kingston Trio.
I love them
The
both.
Reverend Mr. Black.
I love them
Good
both,
song.
but yeah.
Also realize the Arrested Development whole bit that they milk a lot of Tobias's family doing pharmaceutical folk songs,
Oh yeah.
which is such a specific and original singing
Right.
joke, and I'm like, but it's
No,
been done
it's-
before in
yeah.
Mighty Wind,
Sheriff
the exact
Law,
same joke.
Sheriff Law.
A family of folk singers becoming pharmaceutical lyricists.
Well,
Yeah.
in this case,
There's
it's
just Catherine
diuretic,
O'Hara, but-
right? Oh no,
It's catheters.
yeah, it's
no, it's butt drapes and penis clamps. I remember as part of the lyrics.
Yeah.
And he's talking about incontinence all
Yeah,
the
yeah.
time
Yeah.
at dinner. Yeah. Maybe this is some dessert
every
talk.
13 seconds or 13 and a half seconds.
A new incontinent is
Man,
born,
Jim
as it
Pettick,
were.
he's such an interesting one in the cast of characters because he doesn't seem like he belongs compared to like the like SCTV jokey Canadian
right.
You think of Catherine O'Hara and Harry Shearer and Michael McKean. You don't immediately think of him.
Jim
yeah.
Pittick, but
Yeah.
he's excellent.
He is.
So
Yeah.
good.
They're all excellent, and it's fun to watch all 5 movies because they make varying amounts of space for them in different ones.
Yeah.
Like, different people will get to do more,
Right.
and other people will take a smaller bit.
It's very
Yeah.
surprising to me because every time I watch these shows, I usually like this will now spiral me into like I'll probably go home and watch Best in Show.
Not Guffman?
I'll probably watch
Okay,
Guffman.
good.
Well, that's the thing is this with these movies, like whatever I've just watched, which is very rare in like the pantheon of like you watch a Paul Thomas Anderson or a Coen Brothers or something like that, and you're like, you know what, Big Lebowski is really the best or something like that. Whatever I just watched of these is my favorite.
Yeah.
It's so weird. It's because whatever's freshest in my mind, I go, that's so fucking good. Yeah. And then I watch Best in Show, and then I immediately lose A Mighty Wind, and I'm like, Best in Show, you can't beat that.
Yeah.
They're just all, I think it really speaks to, it's a testament to just, they're all of the high quality. They're just of the same quality, and it's amazingly high.
I heard that For Your Consideration was disappointing, which is why I didn't see it. I'm scared.
That,
I don't
me
want
too.
to have that experience.
I saw it in the theaters.
It?
Didn't ever see it again. And
what'd you think?
I don't remember what happens in it.
That's
versus
upsetting.
Waiting for Guffman, which I can tell you, I can start from the beginning of the movie and quote the entire.
I wonder how much of that is nostalgia,
like,
because I get that all the time. Like there's movies that you watch that you go like, you know what? This is actually a good movie, but when I went to it in theaters, I was expecting more because of this name attached to it or whatnot. Because the nostalgia effect of, like I grew up with this movie, or I watched this when it was very formative in my comedian experience or something like that.
Possibly. I wonder how much of it has to do with status, in that, like, Spinal Tap and Guffman, all of these are about people who don't have a sense of their own status, who are huge to themselves and nothing to the rest of the world.
Right.
And these kind of low stakes, low status drama being played out in high status ways. And For Your Consideration is about famous actors.
Yeah.
It's about like high status people having high status problems.
For Oscars that year, right?
Yeah. And there's like, I think the humanness and the charm comes from, we've all felt like high status in a low status situation. My dad at barbershop, or your church choir, or whatever your situation is. And I think For Your Consideration, just,
The Best in Show really works, even though, like, I can't resonate with that neurotic couple whose whole life is about winning the American Kennel Club dog show.
But, like, imagine if, like, you found out that your neighbor won a dog show. You'd be like, cool. And then you would go about the rest of your day.
Yeah, you wouldn't, like, flip out.
Yeah.
Like,
And
Michelle Obama.
Exactly.
Whereas all the other films have the status
you won
interplay.
the dog
I think
show.
that's
Cool.
I think that's salient. Yeah.
Can I see your dog? Oh, yeah, they're cute.
Exactly.
So in other words, if you're listening, Christopher, play a hit.
Be our guest.
Play a hits.
Yeah.
I want to see a tightly scripted psychosexual horror thriller from Christopher Guest.
Well, it won't work.
Don't. CG-driven, crane shots, swooping
That's
around.
the thing about Michael. As long as I've known him, he just doesn't like the hits.
No.
He's got to go for the other thing.
Deep
No.
cuts.
I don't
What's
know.
that Christopher Guest movie that's not a mockumentary, and it's from between Spinal Tap and Guffman, and I think Matthew Perry is in it, and I think Chris Farley is in it.
What the fuck? I've never
Wagons
heard of this.
East?
Did he make a movie called Wagons East?
I didn't know Christopher Guest had any. That's like Chris Farley's last movie, or I might be
There's a
confusing
scene
with
where
John
he's
Candy's
learning
last
how
movie.
to read, and he's learning the alphabet really slowly. That's kind of one of the set pieces in it.
I feel like that's a cowboy movie, and you would know if it was a cowboy movie.
Well,
or
this
not.
one has a Western, but it's like I think they might have been Lewis and Clark.
No, Wagons East. That's John Candy's last movie. There's a movie that has the same exact premise as Wagons East. That was Chris Farley's last movie, I believe.
Look up
Chris
early
Farley's
guest movies.
last movie.
It's funny, you see, because the wagons went west.
Ah.
Yeah. I'm just riffing for. I'm
Stretching
stretching
stretching.
for time.
Almost
Stretching.
Heroes. Almost Heroes is the one I was thinking
Okay.
of. So let's see. I'm going about this a non-internet efficient way. Like, did Christopher Guest direct Almost Heroes? It stars Matthew Perry and Chris
Yes.
Farley.
Then that's
Maybe he
it.
just
Directed by Christopher Guest.
Yes.
So what's it called?
Christopher Guest directed Almost Heroes. Almost Heroes is garbage, dude. It's
Oh, is it?
boring.
I've
and
never
it's
even
not
heard
funny.
it.
Yeah. But
Never
if
even
you
heard
don't
of
like
it.
the hits, if you like the deep cuts,
It's a
that's
really late
good.
era Chris Farley movie where Matthew Perry is the David Spade character because
Yes.
they couldn't
Oh.
get David Spade.
Okay.
And they're shitty pioneers and
Yeah.
they're trying to go west and they get trapped in a downpour so
Yeah.
they're naked and they have to huddle together and
That's
they make
weird that he
gay jokes
directed
and
that because
shit.
I knew that
Yeah.
Eugene
A
Levy
bear
had
comes.
like or I guess this is Christopher Guest, but I knew that they from time to time do like Transformers or American Pie or whatever
Yeah,
the fuck
yeah.
because paychecks. So but like this seems like a beloved kind of movie that they're like if you're directing it you care about
I
this
also
movie.
didn't know he was married to Jamie Lee Curtis.
He is, yeah.
Learn a
Michael
lot
McKean
about
is married to Annette O'Toole.
And they wrote,
Yes.
Kiss at the End of the Rainbow together on 9/11.
On
They're
9/11, while waiting
Yes.
for they were in a taxi or they were cabbing, or
yeah,
I mean,
they were taxiing on their plane.
yeah.
Oh, also, we should talk about the Left Bank. Do you guys know about the Left Bank?
No.
It is
In Gaza?
a
Yeah.
one-hit wonder 60s band. They had or 2 hits, technically, Walk Away Renee and Pretty Ballerina. They put out the records. No one listened to it. 2 years later, people started listening to it. And one of the guys was like, guys, we should make more records. And no one else was interested. So he formed a new Left Bank that included Michael McKean.
Whoa.
The new Left Bank had no success, didn't perform anything. Everyone was over it. No one was interested in the band. But he was briefly in a legitimate kind of folk rock, zombies-esque band
Yeah,
called
they
the Left
easily,
Bank.
Wow.
based on this music, it's like, yeah, you could write real music.
Well,
because
Lenny and the Squigtones also.
it's not even extremely wacky satire. You'd only have to reel it in a tiny bit and it's a real song.
Yeah, there's something. I don't know if this is interesting, but like I've played guitar for many, many years, and you can tell when someone's played guitar, not just like obvious because they're not making a G chord, but it's like when you're performing a G chord on
Yeah.
like a stage versus when you're jamming with a band.
Yeah.
And like just like how you emphasize and like push your fingers in, or how like loosely or lazily you play it.
Yeah.
Like you can tell when McKean is playing, like he's played in jam bands
Oh,
before.
yeah.
Because I saw, like
There's a
that makes
casualness about his
there's
playing.
a casualness about his playing that is like different from when you see his fingers when he's on stage, where it's like methodical
Yeah.
and like I know that everything I'm doing is being recorded somewhere.
Yeah.
Versus just like it's A, no, it's G A G A minor, no, like
yeah.
you're just doing
Noodling.
yeah.
You can do the noodles.
Yeah, and you can see it in the hand, like the hand has
Yeah.
presence, and it's like I find that really cool when someone does
Yeah, it's
that.
so complete.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He also did the Attack of the 50-Foot Woman remake.
Hey.
It's weird. Just watch the mockumentary
Eclectic.
ones.
Eclectic.
Yeah. Final thoughts on Mighty Wind, anybody?
I mean, it's perfect.
You want to play another number for us?
Oh.
No, I think you only prepped one,
I just
right?
prepared the one.
Because if you could do the entirety of Paddy Wagon Baby, Potato Face
I
Baby.
mean, that would have been the problem with playing any of this stuff solo is that it's so harmony driven that it's like
All folk, really.
Yeah.
Yeah. Most folk is, for sure. All right, then we'll wrap it up. Caroline, thank you again for being here and for picking fun things to talk about.
I know, this is a delight.
Where
Both
can
cases.
people
Both.
find you online?
They can find me at Caroline E. on Instagram, where I lift mostly, and then also Twitter. And also you should watch Corporate on Comedy Central, on which I make the occasional appearance. And also I work in the
nice.
room, but yes.
Yes, I knew you worked on it.
Yes,
I have not
have a
espied
character
you.
named Little Cucumber.
There you go.
Yeah.
Destined to fall in love with Pickle Rick in an epic crossover event.
No.
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 All right. Bye, everybody.
Bye.
This has been a Small Beans endeavor. We're a bunch of pals who make podcasts, sketches, music, web series, and movies. The Beans always have new ideas percolating, so make sure to check us out at patreon.com/smallbeans. That's patreon.com/smallbeans, where you can browse all of our current and past content, see what we've got planned in the future, and learn how your support can help the small beans grow into huge, giant monster beans. If you enjoyed this content module, please like, rate, subscribe, or tell a friend about us. We love you.